Alright, I'll make this wide split. But whoever's in front of the computer is going to be vaguely caught.
I'm okay, perfectly fine without being in it. How's everyone doing today? Good. Awesome. I'm AJ Candella. I am an account manager for tech systems here locally in Columbus, and I specifically focus in information security. So really as of about a year and a half ago-ish, tech systems realized that there was obviously a growing demand for information security. We've built up a practice long before that, but locally I stepped into that role to help combat that growing demand and help clients attract and retain talent. So more on the client management side of the house. And I work in tandem with Megan.
So my name is Megan Wells. I am an IT recruiter with Tech Systems. I've recruited in the space the last 5 years or so. Been with Tech Systems 9, primarily supporting network and infrastructure for our different customers and recruiting that talent. So today we just wanted to share with you guys some trends that we're seeing here locally in terms of not only attracting and retaining security talent, but just what the pool of talent looks like, the amount of opportunity. And we really want this to be more interactive. So if you guys have questions or specific topics or things you think that we could answer for you, please do not hesitate to ask. I know we did a similar talk about a year ago at BSides, and we had a lot of great dialogue. So we'd love to continue that again this year. So feel free to stop us if there's something that you'd like to discuss.
Yep, absolutely, at any given point or questions. We have a couple of slides prepared, but really we want this to be catered to you. This is our livelihood of really analyzing trends that you folks do day in and day out, and who's hiring and who's not, and any type of market intel. So at any point, please raise your hand, ask us a question. And we'd love for it to be more conversational than lecturing. Just to gauge the audience, show of hands, how many people, if any, in here are in a hiring capacity? Okay, so we're working with mainly individual contributors. Awesome, great. Cool, so we'll go ahead and get in. So when you look at Columbus locally, there's just a hair over 1,000 information security professionals. What is very interesting is when pulling this information about a year ago for BSides, there was only around 700 resources locally in Columbus at that time. So the good news is it's grown, but not quick enough. The other really cool thing to note at this slide is that the unemployment is super, super low. And what you'll see is when you equate it to, when you factor in frictional unemployment, those who choose to be unemployed, the unemployment for information security professionals is, as I'm sure you guys all know, in the negatives. Excuse me. Also, I don't know if you can really read it on here, but this gray circle right here, that's the National Information Security Labor Force. That has also grown from 70 to close to 80,000 over the past year. But what it pretty much means is companies are battling for the same talent. There is a deficit of quality talent and a surplus of openings here locally and nationally. So when we get into the overview of the Columbus market, as many of you I'm sure suspect, it's continuously risen year over year. Last year was the same. So over the past 12 months, positions have increased, over 1,800 job postings in just 1 year. That's about 152 per month. Also, with the average salary, that is the average salary of the most frequent jobs in information security. So your security engineer, your security analyst, risk analyst, and security architect. That's the average for all of those positions. But also, while the salary increase for the general IT market is 2.5% year over year. For security, it's actually flip-flopped. It's 5.2%. So that's great news for you all. And it's also continuously growing. So this is just, if you scale it back and you look nationwide at the number of information security jobs posted, it's 250,000. If you were to take all of those 79,000 professionals nationally, have them all take new jobs this year, still 68% of those jobs would go unfilled. So there's a huge talent deficit. Also great for you guys. And we'll get into why that matters and how that matters a little bit later with Megan. And then this is for Columbus specifically. So when you look at it, I wish they had it meshed together, but when you look at the trends in the market locally with the number of job postings, it almost mirrors that of nationally if you flip-flop it back. We used to have a chart that actually had the schedule of major breaches like Yahoo or Blue Cross Blue Shield, etc. And with the influx of physicians also was when those breaches happened. So there's a direct correlation with that. So diving in even deeper, who's hiring? Of course, everyone.
The short answer is
everyone, yes.
Right.
But obviously financial institutions lead the way with JP Morgan Chase. BNC's up there. You've got healthcare as well, but with a diverse economy like Columbus, you really have everyone hiring. And 1,800 information security jobs. Really, we're working with 1,000 people. This demand's definitely there. And a lot of people are fighting for the same talent. I blew through that really quickly. Does anyone have any questions?
What's that table sorted by?
The people that hired the most over the past year. Yes.
You mentioned qualified talent. What's driving qualification?
Can you?
You mentioned qualified talent.
Mm-hmm.
What's driving qualification? Is it education? Is it experience? Is it certifications?
That really varies from client to client. But to answer your question, typically I would say experience. A lot of people, the bulk of people are all fighting over the same tenure of security professional, and I would say that's the security analyst that has about 3 to 5 years of experience. So they're fighting over the same type of resource. Any other questions?
Your statistics, I'm curious how much overlap there is, like in the job advertisements. Let's say Tech Systems has, looking for a network engineer for company A, but your rival, is also posting the same job for company A.
Sure.
So do you take that into account in the stats? For
So
the
these are
number of
full-time
job
roles.
postings?
Yep. This is my marketing team full-time positions. So any of the Tech Systems roles or, any other company A, company B, company C, those were taken out of it.
So these are direct postings
Yep.
from these specific customers.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So as we talked about, I'm sure this is no surprise to most people in this room, but security, in terms of CIO priorities, security came up number 6 as a CIO priority last year. Now, with that being said, you can see, obviously, security overlaps with a lot of these areas. So I think it would be unfair to say it's number 6, end all be all, because security is going to overlap with cloud and infrastructure and data center and some of those other things. But it's definitely continuing to stay a top priority into 2017. So one of the things that we want to talk about here today is, as we're talking about companies are certainly utilizing the same candidate pool, or there's only a limited number of talent, we wanted to talk a little bit about not only what that talent looks like, but some of the things that companies are doing to retain their talent and to attract the best of the best. So, I thought this slide was pretty relevant in the sense that 85% of workers are actively searching for a new job or at least open to hearing about new opportunities. So when we're talking about a small pool to begin with, and that certainly means oftentimes your coworkers, your team lead, whoever, they're oftentimes willing to at least listen to the right opportunities. I'm sure many of you in here would listen to the right things. So just knowing that the majority of the folks out there are willing to listen and that they're getting solicited well over 40 times a week, whether it be email, calls, LinkedIn, whatever it may be, definitely makes the talent very, not only desirable, but very, very sought after. So because of that, we're trying to help our customers a lot of times come up with some creative ways to retain people and to attract the right folks, which we're going to talk about a little bit more in a little bit. 60% of employers list employee retention as an issue for them, which makes sense if most people are willing to listen, right? And then 35% of managers cite finding, motivating, and keeping talent as the top priority. So I'm sure you guys have all maybe experienced this in your own company. Retaining your folks tends to be difficult in this type of market, in the competitive landscape that we have currently for security. So one thing we wanted to touch on as well, which I think is definitely relevant in our business, but as we're talking about retaining and attracting the right talent, is kind of how this game of telephone sometimes work with job descriptions. So how many of you guys have interviewed for something that you thought it was one thing on paper, and then you went to the interview, it was something a little bit different than what you're anticipating? Quite a few of you, right? So, it's kind of interesting if you look at this. Generally, the hiring manager over here tells us what they want. Then we get a job description, which generally comes from HR, sometimes from the hiring manager, sometimes not. That then gets filtered out to job boards, recruiters, LinkedIn, wherever it may go out to. And then it finally gets to the candidates, right? So then there tends to be a little bit of a disconnect by the time we're from hiring manager all the way over to IT candidates. Part of that is because sometimes the hiring managers aren't the ones developing the descriptions. Sometimes they're using an old HR description, or maybe it's been modified slightly, but maybe not necessarily speaking to exactly what the customer really wants. Or sometimes there's some, we'll say, lost in translation issues by the time it gets to the candidate. I'm sure we've all seen that happen before. Then candidates tend to tailor their resume, right? Because we want to make sure that we are a good fit for the job on paper. And then by the time it gets back to the hiring manager, those resumes may or may not fit the bill. So, it's definitely something that we work with our customers on, of having a really good job description, because that's going to help us find you the right person the first time around, versus kind of going through this whole wheel, which isn't always the most effective, we'll say. And believe it or not, this percentage down here, only 18% of people find their jobs on job boards. Most of it comes from networking. So it's just interesting how that all kind of comes to fruition. You guys have experienced this, right? Maybe some facet or another?
And I think this is definitely a result of automation in general, too. Anytime anything is just done over the internet, it's with, at least as it relates to finding that correct job, there's a lot lost in translation, and a lot of people are perfecting resumes so that they can sneak through the tool or have keywords highlighted and make it through a vendor management system. And then it gets to the hiring manager and they make it into an interview, but can they really do the job? Who's to say? So it's definitely an area where automation has potentially, I don't want to say hurt, but had some sort of negative effect on finding the right candidate for a role.
So we broke down a little bit the recruiting process here, and this is just kind of interesting in the sense that if you look at sort of the different behaviors here in terms of providing a good job description, on the hiring manager side, the majority of the time they feel like they do that, 72%, right? But what's interesting is as you go down the list, HR and candidate, HR does it about half the time, and the candidate feels like they get a good job description about 36% of the time. So there's clearly a disconnect there between what a hiring manager maybe wants, what the candidate is feeling like they're getting, and what's getting filtered through HR. Same with providing enough detail on technical aspects of the job, and then providing enough detail on the cultural fit. So obviously, hiring manager feels like they do that very well as it pertains to candidates, but HR and the actual candidates don't always feel that way. So one of the things that we've talked about, and I'd love to open up some discussion here on this piece of it, is what we call an EVP, or an employee value proposition. So with the market being as competitive as it is right now, with the amount of resources here in security, the amount of opportunities that are out there, one thing that has helped us and helped a lot of our customers in retaining and attracting some of those people is having a solid EVP. And essentially what that is why someone wants to work for your company. So, a lot of those things aren't necessarily always money driven. Definitely for some people that is an important part of a job for sure. But we're finding with how competitive the market is, having some additional information about why someone will work at that company really can help you attract and retain the right folks. So it could be anything from, hey, we have a gym on site, or we offer daycare, or free parking, or we have a chef that makes meals for us every day, or whatever it may be, flexible hours, work from home policy. We're finding that those things and having a strong culture and different opportunities outside of strictly just pay rate and job duties is really helping us retain the right folks. So I'd love to hear your opinion or thoughts on this, being security professionals. Are there certain things that you look for maybe when pursuing another opportunity outside of money, or do these things could they make something maybe more attractive to you? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything you covered is good. I think another thing is, sort of looking at prospective employers, how willing are they to invest in you?
Sure.
And sort of sending you to conferences like these and bigger
Sure.
conferences. What are they willing to put into your training and personal growth and development? One of the main reasons I left my previous job is because I couldn't get training out of them. And so that became, after asking for it for so many times
Sure.
and never getting anywhere, eventually it's just, it becomes obvious that they're just not interested in sort of the things that are going to help keep me motivated and learning to
Absolutely.
do more and get better at the things I do. And I don't know if the fear is that, well, if we train this guy, he's going to leave because he's going to have new qualifications.
Yep.
The reality is that because you didn't take the time to help further my career, I kind of got bored with what I was doing and wanted to move on.
You ended up leaving anyway, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's an absolute, we hear that a lot on the customer side of, we don't want to invest too much because then they're going to get trained up and get all these certs and leave. But to your point, in the same token, if you don't offer those opportunities to your current employees, eventually they're more than likely going to leave anyway. That's a great point.
Yeah, and then what happens if you don't offer the training and they stay, right? Who's it benefiting? Anyways, no one. That's a huge conversation that I have consistently day in and day out with clients that I'm working with. Training seems to be at the top of everyone's list, or continuous education. And not all companies are there yet when it comes to actually investing in their people. But that's a huge attraction to a new opportunity for individuals like yourself, absolutely. And the huge thing with this EVP, this employee value proposition, is in your industry, recruiters are working with passive talent. Everyone's employed. So there has to be more than a job description, especially a canned one at that, to lure someone into a new opportunity. If 85% are willing to listen, that's great, but that doesn't mean they're willing to make a move unless there's some substance or something to really sell them on a new opportunity. And yes, that may be pay, but it's oftentimes more than that. It's what can the company do for me? How can they help my personal and professional growth as well? Any other questions on the employee value proposition or thoughts?
I mean, I would just say the reality is, being a security professional in this day and age, there's always going to be opportunity, right? So generally, to your point, the passive seekers aren't really going to jump for something unless they're really excited about it, unless it's really going to be, meeting all their requirements or their goals at that time. And sometimes that is money, like you said. Sometimes it's not. But good news is there's plenty of opportunity out there for you guys, obviously. So this kind of goes back to companies being dissatisfied with the quality of the candidates that they're receiving. There's a lot of, some of that comes from maybe starting with the job description and maybe not qualifying the best candidates for the job based on not having the right requirements. But overall, 70% have not been satisfied with the quality of the applicants they've been receiving. Now, I'm not sure if that's strictly from postings or what on that one.
Yeah, I don't know, but I know that with this ties back into really the slide with the disconnect between the hiring manager thinking that they have a great job description and the candidate thinking they have a great job description. And it comes down to if you're relying solely on automation, that's not always your best bet. The best bet is leveraging your network, etc. But companies are not very satisfied with the quality of candidates, even though applicant quality year over year is rated their top metric. So there's a huge disconnect there, and it ties back to making certain that they are working with the top talent. And back to that slide previously of having an employee value proposition of how can we lure this candidate to us? How can we lure top talent? How can we not only attract but retain that top talent in the industry that is that passive job seeker? Because the top talent's working. So there's definitely a disconnect there.
I have a question on the previous slide.
Absolutely.
So when it's dealing with quality of applicants, how do you think the software filters in how does the software gauge the quality of the applicant? Do you know what metrics they take into account?
I don't know as far as a company software. I think there's a multitude of different softwares that they can go with to screen candidates. But what that lacks is the ability to screen for cultural fit, personality fit, which is equally, if not oftentimes more important than just a technical fit alone. And what companies are finding is that software screening, but they're screening resumes that have been edited to make it past that screening. So I don't know specifically what all they look for. I know typically it's a keyword search or a highlighter search. Does that answer your question?
Do you think the way they're actually looking for talents might be the reason why they're getting such bad talent? I mean, if everything's keyword based and they're not actually reading the resume up front?
Absolutely, especially in the information security world. I think the best way is to leverage networking, get out at events like these. You're 74% more likely to land a job through networking, and it's over 54%, 54 times more likely to land a job through a referral, so knowing someone that's at that company. So I think the best way is to get out in the community, and it becomes very difficult when you're relying solely on a job posting or an applicant tracking system. And we can get into more specifics around that too in the Q&A.
So speaking of resumes and screening those, essentially, we found that 57% of employers have caught lies on resumes. So definitely a pretty large amount there. 5% of workers say they've exaggerated their resumes. Now, this may be the only ones admitting it. I don't know. So that essentially means that your shots are kind of 50-50 depending on the resumes that you're looking at. We already know that, our job descriptions aren't always great. We're tailoring our resumes to specific jobs a lot of times. So when we're looking at an actual resume on paper only, there's definitely some hit and miss there for sure.
Did you actually say 57% lie on resumes?
50% of employers have caught lies on resumes.
Caught lies on resumes, right?
Like working with the technology before it actually existed, or happens all the time.
That number just shocked me.
Really?
I can't imagine anybody lying on a resume.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
That's just what was caught.
I'm in a different world.
Oh, that's all right though. That's
For experience beyond how long the technology has been out before as well.
Yep, all the time.
might say they have 5 years of experience with something that's been out for a year.
And the crazy part is the average person or candidate, I should say, spends close to 20 hours tailoring their resume for a job description on average. And the manager looks at it for less than 60 seconds.
It's crazy.
I'm the wrong generation.
Going along with sort of some things that our candidates want and that passive seekers want is, one thing in particular is interview feedback. So how many of you guys have interviewed for a job and never heard anything? Quite a few, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe said, hey, you're not a fit. What does that mean? Right? So 94% of people definitely want that feedback, but unfortunately less than half actually receive it. So, that's definitely something in terms of not only your company brand, but your relationship with that candidate. We find that if people actually do receive that feedback, whether they get the job or not, they're much more likely to pursue another opportunity at that company down the road.
Right. You should say you were number 2, and then when you notice 2 weeks later the job's reposted, you want to say, hello.
Hey,
I don't want to say hello. I want to say you never called me back.
Right.
I don't waste my time anymore.
It certainly impacts how you view that company, right?
Yeah, really negative.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep.
I have to say on the other side, if you're lining up 10 people and you interview all 10, it isn't that the 9 that you chose are missing or really poor of anything.
Sure.
It's just you chose the best. So it doesn't necessarily. A lot of people you may say, well, I found something wrong in your resume or you didn't match the job, but
there's certainly a lot of talent out there.
You're not. It's hard to give feedback when you're choosing from good people.
Mm-hmm.
I can just say it that way. It's just,
Sure.
It's just the way it works.
And this information was pulled from a LinkedIn study a couple years back, and they essentially polled, I think it was 20,000 plus IT professionals from 39 or 40 different nations. And it was consistently the same feedback, that they all wanted that feedback post-interview, and they weren't getting it. And what it got down to, and if there was more hiring managers in here, we would maybe spend some time talking about this, but the candidate experience is crucial nowadays. It's not just the company interviewing the candidate, it's the candidate interviewing the company. And the weight that people put on the interview for making their final decision is so great anymore. So it's something like an 80% of candidates say that the interview, whether they get the job or not, makes or breaks their decision for taking the job. And so that candidate experience and making people feel like they are a part of the team and they are wanted is key critical in finding that talent as well. And really that's your opportunity to sell that candidate on your company and your organization. And we're all competing for the same talent in information security. So that's really, really important for our companies to start thinking about the candidate experience when it comes to interviewing and finding that talent.
So So that's a nice segue into just sort of some closing thoughts here before we kind of open it up to any questions or anything like that. But obviously, retention strategy has never been more important. Part of that is the interview process, I would say. Some of that's going to be your EVP, giving feedback, all those things that we talked about. Obviously, having a strong EVP is definitely going to help your organization. It's going to help you retain people. Making sure that we're actually, as a recruiting force, talking to people versus strictly LinkedIn and messaging and emailing. That definitely goes a long way. There's no silver bullet, obviously, in terms of technology. You know, and make sure we're attracting the top talent across the board. So, one thing I was going to say to your point in terms of the consultant experience, which I think would be a good thing to maybe talk about a little bit now that we have a little bit of extra time here, is I'd be curious to know kind of what some of your experiences have been, what certain things have maybe made the difference when you've been considering a position or even throughout the interview process. I'd love to hear from you guys.
I work with a variety of individuals that are employed by different companies,
Sure.
Contractors, and I see time and time again where they have talent, they go back to their employer to ask for more money, it's denied, and they leave over and over again. And so they bring in new individuals, and it takes them months to get them spun up.
Sure. It's like starting over, basically, right?
Yeah.
And that's after they find those new individuals, right?
Yes, and I've been in this realm for almost a decade now, and I haven't seen any change in how employees or employers are trying to retain their personnel. Are you guys actually seeing these changes? Your slides are saying it's happening, but I'm not seeing it from my end.
Are you speaking strictly of contractors that you work with, or are you saying full-time employees? Or?
Well, they're full-time contractors. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I know that we have definitely seen a difference in retention through tech systems specifically because we've been working on some of these things. But I mean, I guess it would depend on the customer that you're working with and what their parameters around are raises and keeping people satisfied, right?
Yeah, so I can't speak for competitors, but so tech systems, right? We probably should have started at, hey, who's familiar with tech systems and what we do? But it's IT services and staffing. But with our staffing, a lot of people think, oh, we just place a person and that's it. But a large part of what I do is working with local hiring managers or organizations on not only it's proactive workforce management. So not only how do you attract the right talent, but how do you retain them? And that goes back to how do you treat them? Are you treating them like a full-time associate? Are you providing them that feedback that everyone wants? Is there room for growth within the organization? Because whether you're a contractor or employee, at the end of the day, surveys show that we all want the same thing, and that's to advance our skills, our goals, our interests, and to be a part of something greater. Specifically, we're working on engaging that with our the clients that we work with. But as a whole, it's hard to say. I think some companies locally have made strides at making certain that their contractors aren't viewed as second-class citizens. Others still need have some work to do.
Coaching.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions on the market? We wanted to make this as tailor the conversation as specific as we could to you all, and we didn't know who was going to be a part of our audience. So if you have any questions, it doesn't have to be with slides. It could be anything really as related to the Columbus market or job opportunities, etc.
Do you see the private and public having the same trends?
For the most part, yeah. There's not a huge difference. I'm sorry?
I recently switched from 7 years of DoD to the corporate world, and it seems very similar.
Yeah.
Not a lot of difference. I thought it'd be. We always think it's a different.
Yeah.
As a contractor, it doesn't. Maybe a few years. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's really kind of goes back to the same thing I just said at the end of the day. We all want the same things, and year over year what we do is we poll our clients, we poll our consultants, and there's not a huge difference in anything.
I was specifically thinking of the hiring trends.
Same. I mean, we're all dealing, if anything, when it comes to government, it's tougher to find people that are cleared,
Securities that are, clearances are messed up. A little confusing.
Plus, the government can't pay them what they're worth.
Yeah. That's
A lot
another.
of times that is the case.
Mhm.
So you were asking things that motivate us when
Sure.
we're looking for jobs. And I can definitely say one thing that makes me not consider companies is, I was actually just talking to somebody else about this. Information security in Columbus is kind of a small community.
Mhm.
So a lot of people talk, and there are definitely companies in this area that have reputations for being a crappy place to work with bad managers.
Not here in Columbus now.
So, I mean, that's a big thing for me. I can think of at least 2 companies specifically that I will never get a job for.
What companies?
Hey, you're being recorded, by the way. Do you see any movement from the HR side or maybe from more senior leadership to try to get rid of managers who aren't treating their people properly so that they can change that culture and fix that and actually get talented people in?
Not that I'm privy to. Typically, I'm working with hiring managers, and what I deal a lot with is kind of having to call their baby ugly and say, hey, here's what your reputation is like in the local security market. Here's what people are saying or have said. You've got a long road ahead if you're going to do hiring, and so how are we going to combat that? What can you offer? What can you promise? Because the last thing that we want to do if we're partnering with an organization to find them needs is place someone that's not going to be a fit under false promises. So it's not going to make us look good, it's not going to make that candidate look good, and it's not going to help the company meet their business needs.
So when you tell them their baby's ugly, do you find that they're receptive to that, or is that kind of shut?
That's the question, right?
That is the question. It depends on who you ask, but a lot of times, yes. A lot of times, people don't know what's being said about their company or what's going on in the local industry because they're working 50, 60 hours a week. They don't get out to networking events. They don't know any differently. So that's kind of up to us to provide that consultative approach to help them with that.
Do you ever steer them to like a glassdoor.com where they can see what people sort of think about them?
No, but that's actually a good idea. Not specifically, because what we're tasked with is, hey, what is the information security market saying, right? Not what other lines of the business are saying or teams per se. But we do oftentimes talk with them about what we hear, what has gone on. Obviously, as you know, people in IT tend to change positions every 2 years on average. So sometimes it's a manager that inherited another manager's mess, and they may be good-willed and good intentioned, but they're dealing with the wrath of what was before them. So educating them on that and coming up with strategic ways to get around that. Excuse me.
It can be a challenge, though.
Yeah, as I said, there's kind of an ebb and flow sometimes to bigger organizations that have bigger IT departments, whereas your smaller companies, they tend to treat everybody, about the same, and so there are some that sort of have, weird things that aren't really well received in the workplace nowadays. Somebody has to travel a great distance, and you're docking them 15 minutes of PTO time for every 5 minutes they're late, when they can't do anything about a bad traffic jam or car accident. Even things like a very stringent dress code. There's still a few places that try to really force a really strict dress code policy.
Yeah.
Where for example, men would have to wear a long sleeve shirt regardless of what the weather's like outside. Long sleeve button down shirt when it's 90 degrees outside and 80% humidity is not exactly someplace that I want to be, and And there's some places that will just micromanage everybody across the board. They don't
work
make
there,
exceptions.
They won't figure it out.
Right.
The sad thing is they seem to not.
And they will fail, and then we'll be okay.
Yeah, they tend to get a lot of young college people in, and it just kind of becomes an intern sweatshop. In a lot of these cases, it's sort of sad to see, because you see sometimes there are good companies that have really great products. They're doing good things. If they just sort of manage their people better, they could actually.
Well, people don't leave the company; they leave the manager typically.
Yeah,
So.
I think that's probably spot on.
Mm-hmm. Aaron?
So I've kind of been calling it the 3 C's of InfoSec talent, retainment and recruitment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cash, culture, and continuous improvement. If you're looking for talent, you have to be willing to pay them. You have to have a culture that's worth working in, and in continuous improvement, you have to keep training them, because we're all knowledge workers, and skills change and things change, and we all need that training, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without those 3 things, it's really hard to find and keep people, even if you do find them.
Mm-hmm. Were you on our marketing research team? Because that's exactly what they came up with, pretty much.
That's my DerbyCon talk in a nutshell.
Yeah.
That's my talk.
But that you're spot on with that. Yes, cash, money talks, but only so much, right? And it comes down to really the latter two of continuous education and the opportunity for training and advancement in the culture of the company. Huge. So
when you're talking about continuous improvement, what are some things that you are like what are the concepts you're improving? Is it mostly survey-based or content-based?
So we can all sort of argue on the merits of certs, right? Mm-hmm. So whether or not those are good, and what provider is good, but finding avenues for your employees to grow their skills, either sharpen ones they already have or develop new ones. So whether that you can find in a certificate-based track, or you can find that in things like attending BSides or DerbyCon or something like that. Whichever way you want to go with that.
What's suitable is going to be dependent on the individual.
Absolutely. It's going to be dependent on the individual, your organization, and what their job function is and where they want to go in their career.
You had a question?
Moving back to the Glassdoor comment, you said you're only looking at the InfoSec side. Mm-hmm. As somebody that's been doing InfoSec for the last, I don't want to say how long because it's been too long. One of the things I do look at is Glassdoor to see how the other departments are saying their jobs are.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be an idea of the overall company culture. That's also going to tell me whether or not I'm walking into a place where I'm going to be spending 90% of my time watching the employees to make sure they're not doing bad things.
Sure.
Or if I'm actually going to be doing good.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We spend a lot of time talking about the culture, but we don't divulge into Glassdoor. We have other avenues. Certainly something that we could look into. We do a lot of pooling salaries too for local companies and what the averages are to help with increase of salaries for people and retaining the right attracting and retaining that talent. But there might be something to be said to looking into more of what the other lines of the business are saying in regards to the culture itself. Absolutely.
Do you have that salary data? I would be interested to see that.
Not on this computer, but yeah, it's something that I do work with companies to pull, hey, what are the averages? If you're looking for a security architect, but you want to pay, I don't know, $70K, is that really going to attract the talent, the level of caliber that you need for that associate? Probably not. Here's what the median is, here's what the top percentile is making, and here's what the bottom percentile is making. If you want that bottom talent, then maybe, but.
You guys publish that somewhere, or is that just something that companies pay?
No, it's a free service, but we don't have it published anywhere. We typically pull it for people.
Sounds like you might be willing to email this gentleman.
Sounds about right. But yeah, absolutely, that's something that we do, and that's really free of charge. Like I said, it kind of goes back to when and if there is a need and we do help them, we want to make certain that we're not only finding, attracting the right talent, but someone that's going to stay there. So are you in line with that salary band? Because if not, you're just going to look for the next best thing. And that does everyone a disservice. Any other questions?
Are you seeing any talent being able to be pulled in from other areas? I know the country's kind of in the same situation in Columbus, but are you seeing talent move from city to city more often?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that. In the audience. I used to recruit security nationally for a lot of different customers for tech, so I can tell you I've had a lot of success bringing people to Columbus specifically for a lot of reasons, right? It's a very affordable place to live, but yes, I would say people are coming in from out of town.
And if you look at the sheer...
Can do that, though.
What was that?
Not all companies can do that, though.
No.
True.
If you look at the sheer numbers too, last year I pulled up the same numbers. I had numbers pulled for the amount of security professionals locally, and it grew by 300 to this point this year. So BSides last year, this year grew by plus 300 information security personnel locally. Any other questions? Well, thank you. Feel free to grab us if you do and you want to talk offline. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's early.
You slaughter the snake yourself.
Oh. Walked right into it, didn't I? Sure.
So, if someone, if you're
I think general rule is full of your role.
Well, I wish I hadn't missed the first part of the DNS talk.
Essentially, what is your responsibilities?
DNS sec.
He said he's got the way. This one talk is
Or whatever, and you do some research on like the position thing elsewhere, what that is.
Yeah, because it's elsewhere. It's
Yeah.
not formal. Compare that to that discussion becomes a different discussion.
Yeah.
That's when there gets
Yeah. Well, and I think as long as you can justify, to your point,
Okay.
hey, here's what I've done. The data.
along the way.
Absolutely.
Just would like to